Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Thanks. I'm really glad to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about community through pictures. I'm going to apologize in advance to the camera guys because I like to bounce around and gesticulate wildly. So, and it's hard to do that, hard not to do that when you're talking about something that you really, really like. So we've been talking about blogs, and I think the thing that you think about when I think about blogs, I kind of sometimes come to the question about, well, is blogging sort of just another strain version of textual online communities? And that prompted me to start thinking about, well, what is it that digital media, in particular the web, provide us that's really sort of beyond just the texts on the screen? I mean, actually, things like Gopher were pretty good at schlepping around text, if you remember that. And you could get kind of a long way with FTP, with text, if you did that. And, of course, then when you start thinking about that, then you realize that one of the things that really draws a lot of people to the web is the visual aspects of the web. And so that kind of maybe leads us to visual blogging. And so if you're going to think about visual blogging, then maybe there's a couple different forms. And I just sort of posit these as three genres of visual blogging. One being photo blogs, which really carry the aesthetics of visual photography, almost the art part of it. And in that genre, the notion of high-resolution imagery, composition, all of the things that you really think about art, they really play. And there's a lot of sites that really kind of push that. The other one is sort of mo blogging or mobile blogging, and that's the people who are taking pictures with their cameras and uploading those. And one thing that seems striking about that genre is it seems a lot like a day in the life of the operator of the camera. It's often outwardly focused. It's like, I saw this, I saw this, I saw this. Every now and then you see some interesting ones where, oh, here's my buddy. We were at the conference. Right? You see that every now and then. But that's not prominent in that. But there's this third group, and this is the group that I've been looking at, which is what I call these visual blogging communities. And I kind of claim that it's a community of pictures that happens to have some text with it. So what do these things look like? Well, actually, these things, the front pages of them actually look a lot like maybe like a traditional blog. That there's often some text associated with it, and maybe people come to these communities partly because of the text and the interest in seeing the text. But there's something just off of that blog that really draws people, and that is these pages that are like grids of participants' images. How many of you watched The Brady Bunch or know The Brady Bunch? The opening scene where they're in the 9 grid and they're kind of looking around at each other. Okay, so that's some kind of notion of community. That's through visual interaction, and that's partly what's going on here. And I can explain a little bit of this just now, but the pictures are owned by the participants. The participants don't upload it to the site. The site owner just gets a URL to load this picture into the slot, and when the viewer shows up at the page, they'll see whatever new images the participant has placed at their own site. So the participants maintain control. And so you have situations like this crop up, blank spots, because the participant's website is down or something's gone wrong. And at times, the owner of the visual blogging community, the person who maintains that, will shuffle pictures around. Pictures are not always fixed. Once you get a spot, that's yours for forever. There actually is a meritocracy that if the site has more than one page, the people who are more active, they tend to update more or participate more in the community, they get moved toward page 1. So I've talked a little bit about the phenomenon. I'm going to talk just a real brief bit about method. I'm going to show a number of examples of interaction and just a really brief discussion. So in thinking about visual analysis, I'll broadly wave my hands and say there's kind of 3 things that you can kind of do here. One is a content analysis, and that is really looking at the image and saying what's in the picture and kind of organizing, categorizing things that way. Second, there's sort of this notion of an ethnographic analysis, and that's kind of asking, what's this picture about? What does it represent in the context of what this person does on a day-to-day basis and their activity perhaps offline, as well as maybe the relationships that they have with the other people online? And then there's the next stage, which is thinking about interaction analysis. And that's sort of saying, all right, I have this collection. What's the relationship among this collection of things, and how do I understand it? This specifically looking at how they're trying to take turns with each other in interaction. And there are four interesting books about thinking about doing visual analysis. I think we need to, as people who are maybe interested in engaging in the web, think a little bit more about the way in which we engage visual analysis. And so I put this here because I think there are good resources for us to learn from. And that's one of the things that we want to do, is maybe ramp up our notion of practice in these kinds of analysis. So what do we have? Well, we've been archiving these sites twice daily, the whole page. We started out early on with only 9 sites. And our archiver, well, okay, disk is cheap, but no one's paying me millions of dollars, so I have limited disk space. I'll just admit that. So the person who's working with me did not get to do all of the sites that he wanted. We had up to 25 being archived at one time. These sites come and go. They're just like any other phenomenon on the web. Sometimes people stop participating and the site sort of dies. And you notice that when you're capturing exactly the same collection of images day after day after day after day after day after day, it's like, okay, obviously this is not really active. We know of at least 53 sites. At last count, when I was talking with one of the people I work with, he had something like 75 that he knew of as well. But we haven't done one of our sort of polls looking for these in a little while. For this analysis, I picked 19 sites with at least 3 months of data, because we were looking at the data in 3-month chunks. And that's because the interactions can evolve over kind of a long period of time, and so we wanted to make sure we had a long enough period of time that we would understand perhaps what was going on in the conversation. In this analysis, we looked at images spanning from January 2003 to June of 2004, so about 18 months. Now, I haven't finished this. Don't think that this is finished. This is perhaps the first time I'm really talking about the interaction analysis. We did a content analysis, and so I can talk a lot about that, and I can tell you some of the things that I've seen. That content analysis hasn't been published, but it is a paper that I get requests for all the time. So this is the first stab at interaction analysis, and so these are kind of what I would hand wave as the perspective categories. So one is thinking about things as positional play, and that's where people in the picture are using glancing, pointing, or physical references to each other. There's a whole notion of image stealing. I steal your image, and I use that image to reference you or some other prior use of your image. There are these things of themes. They're almost like a visual. Think of going to a sports stadium and people do the wave. It's sort of collective action. There are these themes, and some of the themes are planned. Because there is a textual component, sometimes the runner of the site will say, this week we're having this theme, and people will choose to participate. But then other times, people just think something's cool, and they just kind of do something similar visually. So there's sort of these themes. And then there's this other one, which is where they title the image, and so they cram text into the image. So I'm going to show a few examples of this. So as you know, when you start trying to present something for the first time, often what you try and do is figure out how to do this. And I've done some of these presentations really ad hoc with people and not given away the secret. But I decided to try to make this a little bit smoother, give away sort of what you're going to see in the sequence of images. So in this one, it's really an example of positional play. You're going to see glancing. There's certainly some textual comment, and there's a set of objects, similar object reference. And this conversation evolves over a 2-day period. So this is probably one of the simplest examples. So this is basically a screenshot, and since this is about Rubik's, it's really about this woman, Danielle, and she's got this Rubik's Cube. And one of the things I'd point out is that this Rubik's Cube has this Purina checkerboard pattern. Any of you ever played with Rubik's Cube? Yeah, okay, so this is a recognized solution. This is one of the ways that you solve the Rubik's Cube, right? The sort of the canonical one is the same color all on one side, but that was a sort of a demonstration of mastery when you could get certain types of patterns on your Rubik's Cube. So this isn't just simple solution. This is, oh gosh, she kind of solved it in an interesting way. So here down on the bottom row, what we have is penitent man, and he's glancing up at her. I'm averaging 3.5 minutes. How fast are you? What's interesting in that image? Can you see something that's interesting in the image? Pardon?
His isn't solved.
That's right. His is not solved at all. So it's nothing to do really with the Rubik's Cube. It's really kind of mocking or play in interacting with her and what she's done. And so she posted one day and then he posted the next. Okay. So this is another example. This is another example of positional play. In this case, there's more use of object and thinking about the juxtaposition of objects in the positions. There's also textual comment, and what I would point out is this conversation takes place over 18 days. So when you think 18 days, think how many sequences of images there are here, and you'll see it's actually not really long. So it occurs down here in the bottom. Just so that you know, in the first one, there's a lot more adornment. All of these have adornment, but for some of our purposes, we've tried to strip away the adornment so we can focus on the analysis of the imagery. And in some of these cases, because there's many, many pictures on the page, I don't actually show you the entire page. So in some cases, there's more going on. Anyway, so they had a theme of action figures. Maybe you don't think of action figures as kind of an adult activity, but there are communities of people who are adults that find action figures really cool. And so there had been an action figure thing going on this site. And this person down here at Fizz had bought these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, and in this thing says these new turtles own damn you Toys R Us for only having 2. So there's 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, only 2 happen to have shown up at Toys R Us. So he only got 2 of the 4. All right. So then the next thing that happens is there's this update by this person, Cytail, and it says Gundam Crush Ninja Turtles. I know you can't read that. Gundam is another one of these anime action things that you can get figures. And so you see Gundam moving after the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're going to crush Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And the next thing you notice is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He's now got all 4. And he's basically kind of saying, bring it on. Okay, so they're basically playing in the photography, in their pictures, and the way they're posing and what it is that they're going to do. Okay, this is another example. This is from the Electronic Entertainment Exposition. E3 is kind of a gaming exposition. A lot of these guys and gals, they're gamers. That's one of the sort of sub-interests in these groups. And what you're going to see is a certain type of visual interjection. It's kind of like interrupting a little bit in the conversation. You're going to see a notion of sequencing, how the sequence of turns is important. You're going to see a little bit of collective participation, that they're kind of going along. This conversation crosses multiple pages. This is the first example I'll give you where it's not the same page, that the people interacting with each other are not on the same visual page. And this conversation takes place over about 5 days. So what happened is a subgroup of them had gone to E3, and this was one of the times that they had actually gotten to see each other physically, face to face. And so this person, who happens to be Pork Fry, which is his spot, he had this picture taken with 2 who happens to be the person right below him. Okay, so they had this picture taken, and I guess it was on Pork Fry's camera. And Pork Fry posts this picture of them at this event. So then, in the next phase, what happened is 2 steals the picture. But what 2 knows is that there was another person there that they had participated with, and that's this guy that he has pasted into the picture. Photoshopped in. This was a third person who happened to be at the E3 conference with them, but didn't get into this picture with them. The picture that Pork Fry had. So 2 said, oh yeah, that's cool, but there was someone else there with us. Here he is. Okay. Then on another page, we have M, who says, you know what, gosh, I wish I was there with you guys. Paste myself into the picture. And then, yeah, so that's a crossing a page. And then something else happened, and that is that this person, Valric, who 2 pasted into the picture, he goes, well, I was there, and actually I had my picture taken with him. So here's the same kind of theme. I want to participate in that conversation. I'm not stealing the picture, but I was there. Here's where I was with this. So that's kind of like a side note to the conversation. It's like sort of on the conversation, but not kind of off to the side, not quite on topic, but definitely there. Then we have a couple more. What happens then is Sissy Jane steals the picture and pastes himself in here. And then Ant steals the picture and pastes himself in right here. If you can see the eyes. Okay, so those happen on the same page. For purpose of the archiver, we don't know I mean, you can see by the sequence because of who pasted when, but the issue is we don't know exactly the timing between them, so these showed up on the same time. And then you can see Fizz in the upper right-hand corner, all right, and he's kind of down here in there, right, and then the next person who updates is Butta P, and he's the sort of bald guy on the left. I'm part of this. And then Val pastes herself in, middle frame, almost at the top. You can just grab her eyes. And then on the next page, this guy named Decipher down at the bottom pastes him. It's not himself. He pastes a flasher in. Because everyone's facing forward, right? So there's the flashers facing them. It says, what a bunch of perverts. You guys all facing the flasher. And then a little bit later, sorry, I went the wrong way. A little bit later, this guy named Thunberg pastes himself in front. Now, the interesting thing about this is Thunberg doesn't take this picture. He takes the picture that this one was based on. So, and you can kind of tell because of the digital ink doesn't show up in the places and the image how it's done. So you can it's kind of like not a response to a response properly in this. It's like, oh, we're responding sort of the same thing. So you can actually kind of imagine this thread sort of visually. Okay, the last example is fan. And this is more an example of text and picture. You're going to see object use, textual comment, and an interesting thing, which is animation. And this crosses pages, and this takes 3 days. So Tom Brazelton here says, hey, see this ceiling fan? I installed it. That's mine. Right? And so he's pointing out to that reference. On another page, this Lucifer Malash plays, hey, could you come over and fix mine? It's broken. Right? 2 different colors of text, right? Kind of comment. And then you see another guy right next to him, hey, let's make it show off your fan theme on this site, HBF, right? And that fan's whirling. And then this is the last part of this conversation is this one. It may not be a ceiling fan, but I still installed it. Well, I took it out of the box and plugged it in. And I just want to be cool like you guys. Stop picking on me. And it's animated. Right? This is kind of like, all right, kind of a mundane conversation. How many of you would really want to have an ongoing conversation about ceiling fans? But there's something here about animating it that kind of is like sort of the exclamation point. This ends this conversation, right? I mean, this is over. This is too cool, right? In the sense of, all right, he figured out something interesting to do. So just kind of entering the discussion, are there markers of community? I think there are things about interaction. There are notions of affiliation. I haven't showed some of those. There are notions of accountability. There are some examples that I didn't show where people actually took action in picture or comments in picture that in essence kind of offended the community. There's a whole notion about what constitutes appropriate participation in these communities as well. And there's 2 sort of large genres of participation that I haven't gone into. So there are some limits on thinking about interaction through these kinds of pictures. Visual conversations are still somewhat rare. All right, we looked at a lot and we looked at gobs of websites and didn't come up with huge numbers. I mean, I'll just say it's somewhat rare. Often the dyadic conversations are more prevalent, and there's much more notion of positional play, but we have seen things that cross many pages, and even ideas, memes, if you want to try and call them that, conversations that cross sites. We have some that cross websites, where someone is participating in 2 sites, and they post a picture, and because they use the same picture in a site, it gets picked up in another site, and people start conversing about that. So it's almost like 2 conversations in different things. And naturally, because it's often dyadic, the most prevalent thread length for this kind of thing is 2. So I encourage you to take a look at these for yourself. Here's some websites that you can look at. These tend to be kind of interesting. Most of my examples were from Hot Butter Funk. It tends to be one of the most interesting participatory sites. And the key collaborators I want to point out are Jeff Towle, who's at Berkeley Sims program, finishing his master's, and Susie Sorocek, who is a graduate student at University of Washington that I work closely with. So thank you.